Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you're new. Thank you for taking time out of your day to check the video out. We have more PlayStation news, rumors, and leaks to go over and cover today. And we actually do have some Nintendo news as well, considering the Switch 2 reveal is happening tomorrow. We're starting here though with Sony apparently increasing the size of the PlayStation Store wish list. Over on Push Square, they say it looks like Sony has quietly bumped the number of items you can add to your PS Store wish list. The feature has often been criticized for being needlessly restrictive, limiting the number of items you can add to 100. We've regularly butted heads with the cap, being forced to rethink our watched items or turn to third-party alternatives altogether. But first spotted by Reset Era, we can confirm the size of the wish list has been stealthily expanded. We are able to add over 125 items to ours, and there are reports the feature now tops out at about 188 games. We still think this is unnecessarily obstructive. While you could argue there's no need to have so many games in your wish list, Sony now actively encourages you to wish list games the moment they're announced, so you shouldn't have to deal with such pointless limitations. It's a step in the right direction, and the PlayStation Store is definitely getting better, but there are still many restrictions and oversights before the storefront catches up to places like Steam. So, yeah, just thought this was worth mentioning. I mean, I personally don't use this feature on the PlayStation Store, but obviously a lot of people do. And it is true that Sony definitely encourages you as soon as games are announced and revealed to wishlist them. So it's good to see that they're increasing the size. Moving on to the next topic, we're finding out that Sony has apparently ended PS4 shipments. Being reported by PlayStation Lifestyle, it looks like PS4 shipments have quietly started coming to an end if an update on PlayStation's official website is anything to go by. Hawk-eyed fans have spotted a notice on the console's Japanese website stating that both the PS4 and the PS4 Pro are no longer being shipped in the country. We first spotted screenshots of the notice circulating on social media and traced it back to this NeoGAF post where a user shared evidence that this tidbit of information that we're just spotting now actually dates back to March 28th, 2024, but it didn't get picked up by Western news outlets until now. However, Japanese websites reported that PS4 shipments were ending in the country as far back as December of 2023. It's worth noting that PS4 Pro shipments in Japan ceased back in 2021. However, the PS4 Slim was still being shipped until last year. In addition to the console, accessories like the DualShock 4 have also been discontinued in Japan, as reported by a Japanese publication. For now, PS4 consoles and its accessories are still shipping in other countries, but Sony is understandably winding things down. Despite its popularity, the PS4 is a dated console, and with PS5 being almost 5 years into its life cycle, it makes sense for the company to move on. So I thought this was worth mentioning just because it seems like we are potentially getting closer to Sony completely winding down PS4 shipments and anything related to the PS4 going, deeper into 2025 and into 2026, which shouldn't necessarily be a surprise. Moving on to the next topic, we have yet another rumor regarding Starfield releasing on PS5, coming from Push Square once again. They say Bethesda's epic space opera Starfield, a game which was once described as, quote, one of the most important RPGs ever made, end quote, could have released on PS5 already. At least that's according to well-connected Microsoft reporter Tom Warren, who was speaking as part of the Xbox 2+1 podcast, where he implied original plans may have involved releasing the port alongside the game's Shattered Space expansion. The DLC launched late last year on September 30th to fairly unremarkable reviews, attracting an aggregate score of just 58 on Metacritic. Warren continued, quote, they've been working on the PS5 port of Starfield for a while, so it should be ready later this year when the next expansion pack drops. Should being the key word, end quote. Elsewhere in the podcast, Tom Warren explained that Forza Horizon 5 was also planned to release on PS5 last year, as it was widely reported, so it seems that there was a slight change in strategy within Microsoft, and it decided to move these titles into 2025 instead. So I thought this was worth mentioning because Starfield is one of those games that a lot of people have continued to discuss when it comes to Microsoft porting their titles to PlayStation 5, and I think it's more than obvious that eventually Starfield is going to launch on PS5. It just makes sense, but it is interesting that apparently it was supposed to launch sooner. If I recall correctly, there were multiple people who were, supposed to be connected to what Microsoft is doing, claiming that there wasn't even a plan to port this game to PS5. It just didn't even exist. But now we're getting a completely conflicting report here from Tom Warren claiming that no, this was actually going to release last year, but they decided to push it back for whatever reason. So let me know if Starfield is a game you would play if it comes to PS5. But continuing to talk about Xbox games on PlayStation, we have another report here from PlayStation Lifestyle where it talks about how these games are selling. It says here Microsoft's Xbox brand is slowly inching itself away from console exclusives and becoming a third-party publisher. Many games from the Green Gaming brand's portfolio have made their way to PlayStation consoles, some of which have recently topped pre-order charts. However, according to recently collected data, it seems Xbox's new multi-platform direction hasn't quite paid off on PlayStation platforms. According to data collected by Alina Analytics, Xbox's biggest seller on PlayStation is Sea of Thieves, which has sold 1.8 million copies. Next up is Obsidian Entertainment's Grounded, which sold 432.2 thousand copies. In comparison, Sea of Thieves and Grounded sold 13.3 million and 4.1 million on Steam respectively. Some of Xbox's more niche games like Age of Mythology Retold and Pentiment did not sell nearly as much. Firstly, Tango Gameworks' critically acclaimed Hi-Fi Rush only sold 137.3 thousand copies on PlayStation. Age of Mythology Retold and Pentiment sold 41,000 and 14,000 copies respectively. In comparison, Hi-Fi Rush, Age of Mythology Retold, and Pentiment sold 697,000, 435,000, and 261,000 copies on Steam respectively. So, are Xbox games selling well on PS5? Well, compared to Steam, definitely not. However, that doesn't mean it wasn't worthwhile. For Microsoft, the money gained from bringing these handful of titles to PlayStation platforms would be non-existent if they had remained console exclusive. So while these games may not be selling at gangbusters, still seems like a worthwhile direction for Xbox. Something I did want to point out here as well is I remember going over a report where internally the big game that was going to be the determining factor for Microsoft deciding to continue to release more of their titles on PlayStation was Sea of Thieves. That was the one that they needed to know if it was going to succeed or not. And it did. I mean, 1.8 million isn't crazy, but considering how old Sea of Thieves is and how long it's been out on other platforms, I mean, that's just 1.8 million extra copies sold and just more money for Microsoft. I kind of view it the same way that Sony, approaches putting their games on PC, where it's like they're coming years later. They're clearly not going to do nearly as well launching years later on Steam compared to when it launched originally on PlayStation 5. But we're going to move on to the next topic, which talks about the Nintendo Switch 2. First, we have a report from Insider Gaming. It says the Nintendo Switch 2 is set to get its full reveal on April 2nd, and there are plenty of rumors and speculation about what the latest console from Nintendo will feature. One such rumor is that the Nintendo Switch 2 will support 4K resolution in some fashion. Past rumors suggest that the Switch 2 will support 4K when docked. When in handheld, however, it will have a 1080p resolution. Despite the claims of 4K support, however, there is some question as to whether that's accurate based on what was said during the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco earlier this month. Quote, "I heard this from one developer at GDC and also heard it separately in an email, but the dev kits, or some of the dev kits, don't have 4K output," end quote. This is what Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson said during the latest episode of Insider Gaming Weekly. It should be emphasized that the lack of 4K output on a dev kit doesn't automatically mean that the system won't support it. Console development kits don't often fully match the specs of the final system. For example, some dev kits offer more memory to allow for better debugging and leave out features that don't impact testing too much, like, for instance, a 4K output. Sticking on the topic of dev kits, to follow up on a prior Insider Gaming report on developers expecting them in June, it was clarified that it's likely that some of the major third-party developers have them already. It's the smaller studios that are still waiting on them to come in. So this is something that definitely is making the rounds right now, considering we're about to see the full reveal of the Switch 2 tomorrow. And yeah, people are pretty, I would say, torn on the notion that the Switch 2 will not offer 4K output even when it's docked. I did see quite a few people saying that if it can offer 1440p resolution, they're more than happy with that, which is understandable. But there's definitely an expectation, I would say, from a group of gamers who are planning on getting the Nintendo Switch 2 that it will output in 4K to some capacity. there's no denying that it would be, I would say, slightly disappointing for some people if that doesn't happen, but we'll have to see. As this article points out, this is just based on dev kits, and it doesn't necessarily reflect the final specifications and what the Switch 2 is actually going to be able to do. So we'll find out tomorrow. But the final topic regarding the Switch 2, again, has to do with dev kits. This is actually coming from the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit. And it says here, John Linneman of Digital Foundry says that many developers still don't have Switch 2 dev kits based on what he heard at GDC. We'll talk about GDC later, but based on a lot of things I've heard, it also seems like many developers are still without kit, so they are very slow at rolling this out to a lot of developers. He continues saying, I think there will be third-party games early on, of course. It just seems like a lot of medium to small developers still do not have access to development hardware, so Nintendo has been very selective with who they allow to do it. Now, this, I think, is worth going over prior to the reveal of the Switch 2 because there is, I think, an expectation that the emphasis tomorrow is going to be on Nintendo's first party, of course. But there's also an expectation that some big major third-party publishers and games will also be revealed for the Switch 2. It seems like what's not really going to be there and what's not going to be emphasized are medium to small games or indie games. And according to what John Linneman's saying here, it seems the reason for that is because, well, they haven't had the opportunity to bring their games to Switch 2. That's going to happen later on. So just thought it was kind of worth covering this. The very last thing I want to throw in here at the end is that Insider Gaming also reported, by the way, that tomorrow after the Switch 2 event, pre-orders are going to open up on April 9th. So apparently pre-orders for the Switch 2 are not going to open up immediately, not until the 9th, and the release is apparently going to be in June. They did not give a specific release date for June, but just simply saying that June is the targeted month, apparently, for when the Switch 2 is dropping. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. That's going to do it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. If you did, be sure to leave it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share the video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.